The air in my daughter's apartment was thick with the smell of expensive perfume and something else, entitlement. Her name is Michelle. My name is Evelyn Monroe. And in my hand, I held a piece of paper that felt heavier than the world. A pawn shop receipt. $110,000. Michelle, what did you do? She didn't even look up from her vanity mirror, surrounded by designer makeup I'd never seen before. She was packing for her spring break trip. I sold it. So what? My voice was barely a whisper. That locket. That was your father's history. That was Eliza Monroe's. Yeah, Eliza. Some ancestor. She snapped a suitcase shut. It was just old junk, Mom. It paid for my trip to Greece. Finally, it's useful. I gripped the receipt, the edges crinkling in my fist. That old junk was your great-great-grandmother's freedom papers from 1865. You sold our family's soul for a vacation. Michelle finally turned, her eyes cold. I sold it, and you can't do anything about it. You're just too poor to understand. Hello, everyone. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. It keeps our stories alive. To understand what Michelle saw when she looked at me, you have to understand my life. In her eyes, I was a failure. A 53-year-old widow, living in a modest 2-bedroom bungalow in Atlanta, Georgia. My job, a hospital administrator, earned me $60,000 a year. Enough to live, but not enough for the world Michelle wanted to belong to. I drove a 2017 Honda Accord, the paint fading, the mileage ticking over 150,000 miles. My clothes came from department store sales. My idea of a splurge was a quiet dinner at a local restaurant. My husband David had been gone for 2 years, a sudden cruel heart attack that stole the light from our home. Michelle blamed me for that too. She believed in her heart that if I had made more money, we could have afforded better doctors. As if a black man's heart attack was a problem that money alone could solve. But Michelle didn't want to hear about systemic issues. She just wanted someone to blame, and I was the closest target. I was the broke mother, the pathetic widow, the woman holding her back from the life she deserved. She stood there, surrounded by new luggage, looking at me with pure contempt. You're just too poor to understand, Mom. I looked at my daughter, this stranger I had raised. She had no idea. She had no idea that my poverty was the very thing funding her entire privileged life. I left her apartment, the receipt for $110,000 clutched in my hand. The drive home to my little bungalow in Atlanta felt longer than usual. My house is small, but the oak trees in the yard are old and strong. The porch swing is the same one David and I sat on for 25 years. It is a simple life, the one I built. My 2017 Honda Accord isn't new, but it's reliable. It gets me to the hospital, where I manage schedules and ensure patient files are handled with care. It's a good job, an honest job. It pays my bills. It just doesn't pay for the life Michelle wants. My husband, David Monroe, was never a man obsessed with money. He was a man obsessed with history, with truth. He was a professor at Whitmore University, one of the most respected voices in African American history in the state of Georgia. He taught me that our legacy wasn't in dollar signs, but in the stories we preserved. We are the children of people who survived the unsurvivable, Evelyn, he used to say, his voice warm. He held that locket in his hand, the one he inherited. This, he'd whisper, this isn't just gold. This is Eliza Monroe's declaration. She bought her own freedom in 1865. This paper proves she was a person, not property. He valued that history more than anything. He believed our greatest wealth was our resilience. When he died 2 years ago, the church was overflowing. Students, faculty, community leaders, all there to honor a man who lived with integrity. I thought Michelle understood. I thought she saw the wealth in his legacy, in the love he left behind. But grief changes people. Or perhaps it just reveals who they always were. Michelle's sadness quickly curdled into something else: anger, and then shame. She started seeing his legacy as a burden. She started seeing my quiet life as an embarrassment. The friends she made at Whitmore, the ones from old money, didn't talk about struggle or history. They talked about ski trips and trusts. Michelle wanted that. She didn't want to be the daughter of a history professor and a hospital administrator. I lived the way David would have wanted me to. I kept our life simple, focusing on what mattered: community, faith, humility. But Michelle didn't see humility. She saw weakness. I was honoring the man I loved, but in my daughter's eyes, I was just a failure. Michelle is 22 years old, a senior at the prestigious Whitmore University. She is beautiful, intelligent, and more than anything, she is deeply ashamed of me. Her world is the manicured lawns of the university, the gleaming luxury cars in the student parking lot, and the casual, unspoken wealth of her friends. I see them in her social media photos. Girls with easy smiles and last names that match the buildings on campus. I am not part of that world, and Michelle has made it clear that my existence is a liability. The first time I saw it, I thought it was a joke. A video on her Instagram, filmed in her pristine dorm room. She was laughing with a friend. "You guys, my mom just tried to take me to this old school soul food place." I was like, "Mom, can we please just go to a real restaurant, not a struggle meal?" Her friends in the comment section laughed. "Iconic," one wrote. "My mom tries that too," another posted. It felt like a small sting, a paper cut. Then the videos became more frequent. She would come home to my little bungalow in Atlanta, and I would see her phone angled just so. She filmed my living room, the 15-year-old sofa David and I bought at a clearance sale. She zoomed in on the family photos in their simple frames. "Just visiting the historical district," she captioned it with a laughing emoji. She was erasing me, erasing David, erasing the home that raised her. She changed her bio. It used to say Atlanta girl. Now it just said Whitmore, class of 2025. She never posted photos of me. If I appeared in the background of a family friend's picture, she would untag herself. I was her dirty secret, the poor, simple, unglamorous mother who didn't fit the brand she was building. She wanted to be someone new, someone self-made, who had risen above her embarrassing working-class roots. She wanted to be someone who wasn't my daughter. The humiliation that stung the most happened 6 weeks ago. Michelle brought 3 friends home from Whitmore for dinner. I cooked David's favorite meal, braised short ribs and collard greens, food that spoke of home. The girls were polite, in that sharp, detached way of old money. They complimented my home, their eyes scanning the worn furniture like they were in a museum. "Your mom is so nice, Michelle," one of them said, a girl named Madison. Michelle laughed, a tight, forced sound. "Yeah, she works really hard." Madison turned to me, her smile bright and unknowing. "What do you do, Mrs. Monroe?" I smiled back, wiping my hands on my apron. "I'm a hospital administrator over at Emory. I handle patient scheduling and records." Before I could say more, Michelle jumped in, her voice slicing through the conversation. "Oh, Mom, don't bore them. It's just paperwork, scheduling, that kind of thing." The table went quiet. Madison's eyes flickered to me, then back to Michelle, unsure. "It must be tough," another girl, Chloe, said softly, trying to fill the silence, "especially with Whitmore's tuition. That school is no joke." "Oh, I'm on a full scholarship," Michelle said quickly, waving her hand dismissively. "Academic merit. My mom couldn't afford a single credit, even if she wanted to. She said it as if I wasn't there, as if I was a piece of furniture, a background detail in her life. Michelle, I said, my voice quiet but firm. What? It's true. She didn't look at me, just kept addressing her friends. She couldn't pay $62,000 a year for my education if she tried. The friends nodded, their expressions a mix of pity and polite embarrassment. Pity for me. I said nothing. I just stood up, cleared the plates, and went to the kitchen. I could feel their eyes on my back, but it was the look in my daughter's eyes that hurt the most. Pure, cold, unapologetic contempt. The final public humiliation came 3 weeks later at a parent-teacher conference I had requested. We were sitting in a polished mahogany office at Whitmore. Dr. Marcus Cole, a colleague of David's for 20 years, sat across from us. Dr. Cole was a kind man. He had been a pallbearer at David's funeral. He was also one of the few people on campus who knew I managed David's estate. Michelle is doing excellent work, Evelyn, Dr. Cole said, his voice gentle. Her GPA is a 3.8, well above the 3.5 requirement. He smiled. The David Monroe Memorial Fund has very specific criteria, and she is exceeding all of them. The air in the room froze. Michelle's face went tight, her skin flushing a deep red. Dr. Cole, please. He looked at her, confused. Excuse me? Can we not talk about my financial aid in front of my mother? Michelle's voice was sharp, cutting. It's embarrassing enough that she can't contribute. Please don't make this worse. I sat there, my hands clasped in my lap, feeling the heat rise in my own face. Dr. Cole's expression shifted. He looked from Michelle's furious, humiliated face to mine. He saw my simple department store dress. He saw my worn handbag. And in that moment, he understood. He understood everything. He gave me a look of such profound, quiet sympathy, it felt worse than an accusation. He knew David's legacy was paying for this, and he knew Michelle was too blinded by shame to even recognize her own father's name on her scholarship. She was so ashamed of me, she'd never even bothered to read the paperwork. Dr. Cole cleared his throat, shuffling papers. My apologies. Let's move on to her thesis. I didn't hear the rest. I just stared at my daughter, this stranger. She was ashamed to discuss money in front of me, the woman who had signed every check. That evening, I was alone in the quiet of my bungalow. I went into David's study, a room I usually kept closed. His books were still on the shelves, his reading glasses on the desk. I was dusting, trying to feel close to him, when I noticed the small mahogany box on his mantel. It was where he kept the locket. I opened it. The velvet lining was empty. A cold dread, sharp and immediate, seized my chest. I told myself I had moved it. I told myself it was in the safe. But I knew. I knew I hadn't. I walked numbly to Michelle's old room. It was neat, barely used, except for the new designer suitcases piled by the door, ready for her trip. My hands were shaking. I wasn't a snooper. I had never invaded her privacy, but I had to know. I looked in her desk drawer, under a pile of university papers. I found it, not the locket, a receipt, from a high-end pawnbroker and jeweler downtown. One antique gold locket, one on historical documents. The amount was staggering, $110,000, and beside it, tucked into her passport, was a first-class ticket to Athens, Greece. The shock faded, replaced by something else, a cold, hard clarity. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't youthful carelessness. This was a transaction. She had sold the soul of our family. I drove straight to her apartment. The receipt felt like a burning coal in my hand. I used my emergency key. I didn't knock. She was standing in her entryway, zipping the last designer suitcase. Michelle. My voice was shaking, but not with sadness. It was rage. You sold it. She turned, her face a mask of annoyance. I told you. I sold it. So what? So what? I held up the receipt. $110,000. That's what Eliza's freedom was worth to you? That's what your father's entire legacy was worth? Oh, stop it. She rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes. Dad is dead. He doesn't need jewelry, and neither do you. That was not jewelry, Michelle. That was our history. That was the proof of our survival. It was just sitting in a drawer, she yelled back, her voice rising to match mine. It was collecting dust. At least I put it to good use. Good use? Grease? A first-class ticket and designer bags. Yes, she screamed. A life I deserve. A life you and Dad were too weak to build. I'm tired of being the poor girl, the one who has to pretend struggle is noble. My voice dropped, the anger freezing into something sharp and cold. Your father taught you to honor that struggle. He taught you that Locket meant we came from people who refused to be broken. She scoffed, grabbing the handle of her suitcase. History doesn't pay for Instagram content, Mom. She brushed past me, heading for the door. And honestly, I'm tired of pretending to care about slavery stories. That's not me. I'm moving on. I stared at the back of her head. This child I didn't recognize. That was the moment I knew. The daughter I had raised, the little girl who loved David's stories, was gone. In her place was this stranger who saw her own family's soul as nothing more than cash. She had her hand on the doorknob, ready to leave me in the wreckage of our family's history. She paused, turning back for one final cruel jab. If you're so disappointed, why don't you pay for my tuition yourself? Oh, that's right. She gave a short, bitter laugh. You can't. I stood very still. The rage had passed, leaving behind a cold, quiet calm. You're right, Michelle, I said, my voice even. I can't. Not on my $60,000 salary? She smirked, satisfied. Exactly. But your father's $5.5 million trust fund certainly can. The smirk vanished. Her face went blank. What? The money David inherited from his family. The money he left when he died. I'm the executor, Michelle. I've been managing it for 2 years. She shook her head, a quick, jerky motion. No, Dad was a professor. We weren't rich. David was a professor who came from money and chose to live simply. A lesson, I said, my eyes locking onto hers, that you clearly never learned. You're lying, she whispered, her hand falling from the doorknob. Am I? I took a step closer. Let's talk about your full academic scholarship, the $3 million endowment. The David Monroe Memorial Fund. Her eyes widened, confusion warring with the shock. You never wondered why it had your father's name? You never wondered who the anonymous donor was? The one who paid for your tuition, your housing, your books, for 4 straight years? I let the silence hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. That's me, Michelle. I am the fund. She stared at me, her skin pale, her mouth slightly open. The new luggage at her feet suddenly looked ridiculous. You're lying. Michelle stared at me for a long, silent moment. I could see her mind racing, trying to find a way to make my words untrue. You're making this up, she said, her voice weak. You're just trying to scare me because of the locket. She picked up her suitcase. You're pathetic. And she left. She walked out the door, out of the apartment, and flew to Greece, still believing I was the liar. For 3 days, I sat in my quiet house. I was numb. The betrayal was so deep, it felt bottomless. Then the video appeared. A friend from church, her face full of pity, sent me the link. Evelyn, I think you need to see this. Michelle was on a yacht. The water behind her was a brilliant, impossible blue. She was holding a champagne flute, her face flushed with the sun, wearing a new glittering bracelet. So everyone's been asking how I afforded this, she slurred, laughing at the camera. The truth? I sold my dead dad's old junk. Some locket, I don't know. She raised her glass. Got $110,000 for it. His legacy is worth more as cash than as some dusty old slavery story, right? Her new friends, the ones whose approval she'd bought, cheered and raised their glasses. This, she said, pointing the camera at her designer bag, is what freedom really looks like, not some old papers. The video went viral. It wasn't just her friends who saw it. It was shared across the Whitmore campus. It was shared by historians, by Black community groups in Atlanta. It was shared by David's former students, the ones who had adored him. The comments were a flood of horror and disgust. His daughter? Professor Monroe's own child? She sold her ancestors' freedom papers for a vacation. That was the moment the numbness broke. That was the moment the grief turned into ice. I picked up my phone. I didn't hesitate. I dialed the number for the Whitmore University Development Office, a number I knew by heart. Dr. Althea Vance, please. This is Evelyn Monroe. There was a pause. Dr. Vance, the Vice President of Development, picked up immediately. Evelyn, I've seen the video. I am so sorry. Thank you, Althea, I said, my voice calm and steady. That's why I'm calling. I need to make a change to the David Monroe Memorial Fund. Of course, she said, her voice cautious. What do you need? I want to pull the funding, all of it, the entire $3 million endowment. Shut it down. The silence on the other end was deafening. Evelyn, shut it down? That will impact dozens of students. You're right, I said. Leave 1 year of operating funds, but remove my name as the anonymous donor. And effective immediately, I want you to revoke the scholarship for Michelle Monroe. Evelyn, are you sure? I looked at the picture of David on my desk, his kind eyes smiling at me. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. Michelle returned from Greece 5 days later, tanned and triumphant. She hadn't called me. She hadn't responded to the storm of online backlash. She had simply put her account on private and continued to post pictures of her new, expensive freedom. She arrived back on campus on a Tuesday, ready to resume her life as the Queen of Whitmore. The email from the bursar's office arrived in her inbox early on Wednesday morning. I know, because I received a carbon copy. Final notice. Scholarship revocation and outstanding balance due. I was at my desk at the hospital, reviewing patient intake schedules. My phone, which had been silent for a week, began to scream. Michelle Monroe. I watched the name flash. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, immediately. I let it go to voicemail. A text message appeared. Mom, call me now. Another one. What did you do? What did you do? A third. My account? It says I owe $35,000. It says my scholarship is gone. Fix it. This is a mistake. Mom. I took a sip of my lukewarm coffee. I put my phone on silent. She had to wait until I got home from work. When I walked into my house, she was already there, sitting in my living room, in my house she so despised. She must have used her old key. Her face was pale under the tan, her eyes wide and frantic. The designer luggage was pooled around her feet like a defeated army. Mom, she whispered, her voice cracking, tell me you didn't. I put my purse down on the hall table. I looked at my daughter, this stranger who had sold our history. Tell me you didn't what, Michelle? The scholarship, she screamed, jumping up. They say I owe $35,000. They say I have 30 days, or they're going to withdraw me from school. I looked at her. $35,000. I said quietly. That's a lot of money. Michelle surged toward me, her hands balled into fists. You did this. You called them. You're jealous. You're jealous I had a good time. Jealous I'm getting out. I didn't flinch. I just stood there in my own hallway. You're wrong, Michelle. This is insane, she cried, tears of rage, not regret, spilling down her cheeks. You're destroying my future because I sold a stupid piece of metal. No, I said, my voice cold and clear, cutting through her hysterics. I am not destroying anything. I am simply allowing the consequences of your actions to arrive. She stared at me, the words sinking in. You called your father's legacy cash. You called our family's survival junk. You posted a video for the entire world, mocking the very man whose memory was paying for your education. That education, I continued, was a gift from him, a gift you spit on. So yes, I took the gift away. But $35,000? She stammered, the panic overwhelming the anger. In 30 days? I don't have that. You know I don't have that. I spent the money from the locket. I know. You have to fix this, she begged, her tone shifting. Mom, please. Call them back. Tell them it was a mistake. I'll apologize. No. The word hung in the air between us. You are 22 years old. You are an adult who made an adult decision. I said, walking past her into the kitchen. You sold our family's history for $110,000. Now you have to find a way to pay $35,000. She followed me, stumbling. You can't do this. You're my mother. I turned, the refrigerator door open. And David was your father, and Eliza was your ancestor. You made your choice, Michelle. Now you have to live with it. She collapsed onto the kitchen floor, the sobs ragged and hopeless. It wasn't sorrow. It was the sound of entitlement hitting a brick wall. The first thing Michelle learned was that the friends she'd bought with champagne and $110,000 were not friends at all. Madison didn't answer her calls. Chloe, the one who had pitied me at my own dinner table, suddenly had a roommate issue and couldn't let Michelle stay. Her support system, built on the illusion of wealth, evaporated in under 48 hours. She came back to my bungalow. She didn't ask. She just appeared on the doorstep, her designer bags in tow, her face grim. She didn't speak to me. She just went to her old room and shut the door. I heard her on the phone for days, her voice growing thinner, more desperate. I need a private loan, she said to one bank. $35,000? Yes, I'm a student. No, I don't have a cosigner. The calls always ended the same way. In silence. The girl who had $5.5 million in her family trust, the one she didn't know about, had no credit. No one would lend her a dime. A week later, I came home from the hospital and found a note on the kitchen counter. Got a job. I found out where when I went to the Whitmore campus to meet Dr. Cole for a follow-up. I saw her. She was in the main campus cafeteria, not eating, but working. She was behind the counter, wearing a hairnet and a faded blue uniform, serving pasta to the same students she used to look down on. A group of girls, her former friends, walked by. They saw her, whispered, and then laughed. Michelle just kept her head down, scooping sauce onto a plate. That job, I learned, was $9.50 an hour. It wasn't enough. She got a second job, cleaning offices downtown at night, the same academic buildings where her father's name was on a plaque. One morning, I was leaving for work as she was just getting home. She smelled of bleach and industrial floor wax. Her carefully manicured nails were broken and stained. We just looked at each other in the driveway. She said nothing. She just walked past me and collapsed into bed. The deadline was 1 week away. She was thousands of dollars short. That Saturday, I watched from the kitchen window as a man came to look at her car, the nice sedan David had co-signed for her. She sold it, handed over the keys for a cashier's check. She stood in the driveway, watching the car drive away, her last piece of status. The girl who had mocked struggle was now living it, piece by painful piece. By selling her car and emptying every dollar from her 2 jobs, Michelle managed to pay the $35,000. She made the deadline by 3 hours. She was not withdrawn. She was still a student, but she was broken. She now took the bus to her classes, 90 minutes each way. I'd see her leave the house before the sun was up and return long after dark, her face gray with exhaustion. We were living like ghosts in the same house, sharing walls but no words. Then one evening in early May, I found her sitting at the kitchen table. She wasn't just tired. She looked destroyed. She was staring at her laptop, at an email, and she was crying. Not the angry tears I'd seen before, but silent, hopeless sobs. "What is it?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. She turned the laptop toward me. It was an email from a woman named Dr. Imani Kente, a historian specializing in African American artifacts. "Dear Ms. Monroe," the email read, "I'm a private historian and a former colleague of your father's. After seeing the deeply unfortunate video circulating from Greece, I made it my mission to track down your family's locket. I believe I have come into possession of an item belonging to your family. I recently acquired it from a high-end collector in Atlanta for $85,000. It is a locket containing the 1865 Freedom Papers of an Eliza Monroe." My heart stopped. She found it. The locket was safe. "Dr. Kente says," "She says she knows our family," Michelle whispered, her voice raw. "She found the viral video. She traced the sale. She knows I was the seller." I read the rest of the email. "I am not a collector," Dr. Kente wrote. "I am a preserver. These papers belong with their family. I am willing to sell them back to you for exactly what I paid, $85,000. I looked at Michelle. Her face was a mask of absolute despair. $85,000. She had just bankrupted her entire life to pay off $35,000. $85,000 was not a number. It was an impossibility. It was a gravestone. "I can't," she choked out, burying her face in her hands. "I'll never. I sold it for $110,000, and I have nothing. Now it's $85,000, and it might as well be $85 million. I looked at my daughter, the one who had so casually traded history for cash. She finally understood. This wasn't a problem she could fix with a double shift at the cafeteria. This wasn't a debt she could pay off by selling her car. This was permanent. The locket was found, but it was just as lost as it had been before. She couldn't buy it back. She had lost our legacy, forever. Michelle met Dr. Imani Kente 2 days later. I drove her. Dr. Kente's office was not in a cold university building, but in a small, warm community center in Atlanta, surrounded by books and artifacts. Dr. Kente was a woman in her 60s, with kind eyes and a spine made of steel. She placed the locket on the desk between them. It was the first time Michelle had seen it since the pawn shop. "It's beautiful," Michelle whispered, her hand hovering over it, afraid to touch. "Eliza's proof," Dr. Kente said softly. "I knew your father, Michelle. David and we spoke at many of the same conferences. He would have been deeply hurt by this." Michelle flinched, pulling her hand back. "I know. I told you I would sell it back to you for $85,000, Dr. Kente said, her gaze steady. "Do you have the funds?" Michelle's face crumpled. No, ma'am, I don't. I have nothing." "I know," Dr. Kente said. She leaned forward. "So you are faced with a choice. The same choice your ancestor Eliza faced. What is the price of freedom? What is the price of legacy?" I don't understand, Michelle said. This, Dr. Kente said, sliding a set of documents across the desk, is the alternative. Michelle picked up the papers. Donation agreement to the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I'm giving you another choice, child, Dr. Kente said. You cannot buy this back. Your money, the $110,000, is gone. You cannot own this piece of history again. But you can save it. Dr. Kente's voice was firm. You can let your pride and your guilt demand you possess it, a thing you will never achieve. Or you can let it go. You can sign these papers, and the Locket and the Freedom Papers will be donated in the name of the Monroe family, in David Monroe's name. They will be preserved forever, studied by thousands, honoring his work, honoring Eliza's life. This was the crossroads. This was the true test. Would Michelle cling to the selfish desire to have the locket, or would she embrace the selfless act of honoring it? Michelle looked at the locket. Then she looked at the donation papers. The tears that came this time were different. They weren't for herself. They were for her father. She picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking. My father. He always said this history didn't belong to us, Michelle whispered. He said we were just borrowing it, protecting it for the future. She looked at Dr. Kente. It belongs in the museum. It belongs to everyone. She signed her name. I was waiting in the car. I had told Michelle I would give her privacy. But Dr. Kente had asked me to come inside, to wait in the adjoining room. I stood in the doorway, hidden from view. I saw my daughter, the girl who had sold her soul for a vacation, sign away the one thing she was desperate to get back. It was the first truly selfless thing I had seen her do. She handed the papers back to Dr. Kente, her shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in release. She had finally understood. Michelle came out of the office, her eyes red but clear. She saw me standing in the hallway and stopped. She didn't have to say anything. I could see it on her face. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by a quiet, heavy acceptance. It's done, she said. It's going to Washington, to the museum. I nodded, stepping forward. That was a hard choice, Michelle. It was the only choice, she whispered, the only one Dad would have respected. We drove home in silence, but it was a different kind of silence. Not the angry, cold silence of the past few months. This was a shared, somber quiet. That evening, I found her on the porch swing, David's old spot, just staring at the oak trees. Her senior year was approaching. She had no money, no car, and a grueling job at the cafeteria. I sat down beside her, the swing creaking under our combined weight. I have one more offer for you, Michelle, I said. She looked at me, her eyes wary. Mom, I can't take any more. You haven't heard it yet. I took a deep breath. I will pay for your senior year, all of it, the full tuition. Her head snapped toward me, her eyes wide with disbelief. What? Why? But it's not a gift, I said, holding up my hand. It's a contract, a new one. She tensed. What kind of contract? This isn't from the trust fund. This is from me. I will pay your tuition on 2 conditions. 1, I said, after you graduate, you will commit 5 years of work to our community. The museum, a nonprofit, a school in our neighborhood. I don't care. But you will give back to the people your father dedicated his life to. I watched her face. She was listening. And 2, I said, my voice softening. You will teach your children. You will tell them about Eliza. You will tell them about David. And you will tell them what you did. You will teach them the lesson you learned, so they never have to learn it this hard. She looked away, out at the yard. I could see the pride warring with the exhaustion. The old Michelle would have been insulted. The old Michelle would have called it charity. The new Michelle sat in silence for a long time. "You're not just offering me money for school," she said, her voice barely audible. "You're offering me a way back." "I'm offering you a way forward," I corrected gently. "David's way." She looked at her hands, the hands that were rough from the cafeteria and the cleaning chemicals. "I accept," she said. I didn't cry. I just nodded. "The contract is on the kitchen table. Sign it." Michelle graduated from Whitmore University 6 months later. I sat in the front row, right next to Dr. Marcus Cole. When they called her name, Michelle Monroe, summa cum laude, I stood up and I clapped. She kept her word. Her first job was at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. An internship, unpaid at first, then a junior archivist position. She works in the department that houses the exhibit. On her break, she told me, she sometimes walks down to the gallery. She stands and looks at it, the small gold locket and the priceless powerful paper resting beside it, Eliza Monroe's freedom. Our relationship isn't what it was. The easy, thoughtless bond between a mother and a child is gone. It was broken, sold for $110,000. What we have now is something new. It's harder, but it's more honest. We are two women, bound by the same legacy. One of us learned it through love. The other had to learn it through fire. David may be gone, but his love for history still lives on through the museum. Thank you, my dear friends, for walking this road with me. If this story touched your heart, I'd truly love to hear from you. Tell me, what city or country are you listening from, dear? Rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments, so I can see how far our story can travel. Feels like sitting on the porch with family, just heart to heart. May God's grace be with you, always.